He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
I read a poem one time that said, it's tough on a dog when his boy grows up. I think it's true of just about every category of life when the thing that we've held on to, the thing that we've endured, the thing that we've loved for a long time goes away. Whether that's a friend, a family member, a possession. I remember the first time I had to sell my motorcycle because the job I had said I had to have a car, not a motorcycle, to go visit clients. I cried. I've buried dogs. I've lost friends. But there are traditions that we hold on to the same way. And some of those traditions actually have significant value. They get destroyed by people who don't understand the value of them. And, well, that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned. You're going to want to hear this one. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. There are a whole lot of traditions that we hold on to for various reasons. There are things that we've done just because that's the way my parents have done it. There are things that we've done because, well, we tried a lot of other ways and they didn't quite work as well. Maybe you've heard the old joke, anecdote. I don't like to use a whole lot of other people's stories, but this one holds a lot of weight, and it's been used from therapy and counseling to, let's take a look at why you do what you do. The woman who's cooking the roast for the holiday meal, and her husband comes in and says, why do you always cut the ends off of that? And she said, well, that's the way my mama taught me. And so at the next holiday meal, he sees grandma and he says, why do you cut the ends off the meal, off the roast? And she said, it's just the way my mama taught me. And at the next big gathering, all 3 generations of women in their kitchen together, and they're putting the roast in the oven, and his wife cuts the ends off the roast and starts to put it in there, and her mama says, that looks good, that should be great, and they start to put it in the oven, and then grandma, 3rd generation, she says, why did you do that? She said, well, that's the way you always taught me. She said, I didn't teach you that because you had to cut the ends off the roast. I did that because my oven was too small and the roast wouldn't fit in the pan. Why we do what we do when we have passed down traditions, those are not always logical. Sometimes that was a workaround. That was the only way to do it. But then there are also those traditions that we pass down that they have great and significant value. And they get lost when we forget to do them. We forget to pass them on. We don't share what the value is and why we do what we do. I want to share a quick little video clip which prompted a conversation between one of my mentors and myself. And I think when you see this little video clip, you're going to understand why it's so significant.
By the end of the year. Old Country Buffet is closing all remainder locations. IHOP is closing 100 underperforming locations. Buffalo Wild Wings is closing all Canada locations, as well as 60 locations in the US. Applebee's is closing 35 locations due to underperformance. Red Lobster is closing 50 locations due to financial struggles and high operational costs. Denny's is closing 20 locations by the end of the year. Marie Callender's is shutting down all remainder locations. Pizza Hut is planning to close 500 locations and focus more on delivery delivery services. Outback Steakhouse is closing 41 of their 700 locations. Sbarro is closing a total of 50 locations, with majority being mall locations. Mart Pizza is closing a total of 27 locations. Ruby Tuesday is closing 16 more locations in 2024. PDQ is closing 8 of their 59 locations. Joe's Crab Shack is closing 41 of their 60 locations. Bonefish Grill is closing 7 locations due to underperformance. So sad to see all our favorite restaurants disappear.
Now, I have to ask you, when was the last time you gathered with family around a meal? Or maybe you sat around the campfire with hot dogs and marshmallows on the end of a clothes hanger. Or maybe you're fancy and you bought those long skewers so you can put several of them on there. I saw a guy not too long ago that actually made his own little rotisserie motor for his hot dog so he could sit all the way back and rotate them using a fishing reel. Yeah, very clever. But I wonder how often those gatherings around the dinner table were a place where emotions were shared, thoughts were shared, lessons were learned. If you've ever watched Blue Bloods, the show about the cops, you know, and Tom Selleck's the police commissioner, I believe, you see them on a regular place gather at Dad's house. And that's where some of the biggest arguments happen. That's where some of the biggest healing moments happen. That's where some of the biggest knockdown, drag out emotional things happen. But it all happens in a safe space where multiple generations are gathered around the table, from kids to parents to grandparents, and they have a chance to hash out the realities of life. Maybe you are familiar with the Waltons. You would have to be at least as old as me to remember Goodnight John Boy, but the idea of gathering around the table, when you think of a place like Cracker Barrel, when you walk in the door, right there behind the hostess stand is that one table that seats like 8 people. One big round table so that everybody's facing each other. Everybody faces the middle. It's called family style. Maybe you've been to a restaurant like Buca de Beppo. It's not just a family style dinner. Every little dining area is almost like its own private room. They serve the food in a gigantic bowl, not individual portions for everyone. You order spaghetti and it's enough for 6 people. Why? Because large families gathering together around meals, they solve problems. They hash it out. The food kind of becomes the comfort level. It's nostalgic, if you will, for those of us who grew up gathering around the family table. Maybe it was only for holidays, for Thanksgiving or Easter or Christmas or whatever your holiday traditions are in your faith. But gathering around those meal tables, sitting down over something as universal as a meal. Even when I went to the Congo, we ate stuff that I couldn't identify. They told me it might be dog or goat, and you couldn't tell the difference, and I couldn't tell the difference. I knew it wasn't beef, and it wasn't fish, and it wasn't chicken. It was some other kind of protein that is unidentifiable by me, but it was the proper and polite thing to do to share the meal with those who cooked it. And I did. And we had deep, long-lasting conversations. We built relationships. I recently lost one of my friends that I went to the Congo with. But the meal times that we shared together, he and I would sit at Waffle House for hours and have long conversations. Why not his house? Why not my house? Because Waffle House was a place where we could have a meal together and nobody had to clean up after. See, these dining locations, these restaurants, they face 2 problems. One of them is kind of an archaeological problem. The other is an architectural problem. And leadership is facing the same challenge. Here's what I mean by that. A generation or 2 ago, maybe 3, but I think just 2, because Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated around the same time that I was born. So I didn't know him. I know of him. But see, that was a generation when literally walking down the streets and shouting out to the neighbors, people would already be on their front porches, on the stoop, on their wraparound porches, sitting in the porch swing, having conversations with each other. I'm old enough to remember when I would go off down the street to play, but Mom could still see me all the way down the street. And if she couldn't see me, she could yell to the neighbor, and the neighbor would keep an eye on me. And if I was out of line, the neighbor might as well discipline me before they send me home, because Mom's going to do it anyway. But see, that sense of community, that ability to reach out to your neighbors, to draw them in, to say, let's have a conversation, let's talk about these things that are important. All that changed when the architecture came along and said, let's give the front of the house more curb appeal by putting the garage in the back. And when the garage went to an alleyway entry, there was a lot of change. The front porch began to go away when air conditioning came along and everybody wanted to be in their house instead of out on the front porch with a fan. Or you still see places, the little community that I live in now, there's rocking chairs on the sidewalk. There's park benches around the city square where even if it's a hot day, you might pop inside and grab an ice cream and come back outside because that's where the people are. There's an event going on a regular basis. And from one side of this little tiny town to the other side of this little tiny town, on the other side, you have your strip malls. You have your drone deliveries for the fast food restaurants. You have drive-through lines that are 40 cars deep and 3 lanes wide because so many people would rather order from Uber and have it delivered to them than to go sit down in the restaurant and enjoy it together and take a chance of running into a stranger. But see, the bigger the town gets, the more that's the norm. That opportunity to have the community. We walk into our little place where we'll probably go grab a cup of coffee or breakfast after this podcast is over. We will sit in there and probably see the local pastor. It's not uncommon to sit there and see the local county judge or the mayor, to sit down and have a conversation with the mayor of the city in the same place we grab coffee. That's not unusual at all. But see, as these restaurants that intentionally created that home feel environment, Kentucky Fried Chicken used to have in some of their slogans, it's like eating dinner at home, but you don't have to clean up after. That's kind of the whole point of dining out, but it's also a neutral place. It's not your place. It's not my place. I don't have to clean up before you come over. You don't have to clean up before I come over. Let's go to Cracker Barrel. We can put 8 people around one table. We can sit in front of the fireplace and see what it would have been like to be in Grandpa's hunting lodge. But the shift in our cultures, the abandonment of our traditions, has had a massive impact on our buying habits as consumers. Would we rather just pick up our phone and use the app and order our food and have it delivered by a stranger to our house, leave it on the front porch, don't even have a conversation, don't stop and ask for a tip? It used to be you could at least get a minute or two with the pizza delivery guy. No, not anymore. Most DoorDash is literally that. They throw it at the door and then they dash away. I know for a fact I used to have food delivered to my front door that I didn't order. It actually belonged to the handicapped couple next door. He was blind, she was in a wheelchair, and the DoorDash people would leave their food on my door. Sometimes I wouldn't discover it until the food had gone bad. It had ants in it. The milkshakes were melted or running out of the top of the cup. It left a mess on my porch, but it meant they paid for food they never got. Oh, somebody had a picture of a DoorDash. It's on your doorstep. Yay. Poof. I'm out of here. I'm off to make the next thing. Thanks for tipping before I delivered my food. But see, we're losing so much more than just, are we having a dining experience together? If I was in front of a crowd, I'd say, raise your hand if your first job was waiting tables. Or at some time working your way through college or picking up a little extra cash, you've waited tables, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned. In fact, leadership lessons to be learned waiting tables. There's a whole lot to be learned about selflessness, about humility, about the willingness to serve others for very little reward. All of those are lessons you learn when you're serving tables in a restaurant. How you take care of people and their special needs or their specific needs. How detailed are you in that process? See, all of these are things you learn when you're waiting tables, when you're serving tables, whether it's as a bartender or in a restaurant. And those things that you learn about service, I don't think there's any college classes on that. In fact, I'm not sure there's a high school class on that, but I can tell you this for a fact. It has benefited the way I do customer service, even in my business now. And I haven't waited tables in over 25 years. That doesn't mean I wouldn't. If I need a little extra money for a vacation or a Christmas gift or a surprise, I might go wait a table somewhere. I know I bust tables at busy restaurants as a guest because there were other guests waiting and the servers couldn't catch up with it. In fact, I remember getting up at a Denny's that had only 2 clean tables in the entire restaurant. And when I got up and started doing it, it was catching. 6 other guests got up and we all bussed the entire restaurant so that the host staff could seat people so they didn't have to stand at the front, or at least they'd have a place to sit down even if they couldn't get service for a minute. True story. There are lessons to be learned that way. There are leadership lessons to be learned that way. There are management lessons to be learned that way. There's self-discipline to be learned. And in the restaurant industry, Not everybody wants to stay there for a career, but I have friends who have run restaurants, owned restaurants, worked at the corporate. I ran a restaurant for a long period of time. I've served, I've waited tables, I've run the drive-through. I was the GM of a restaurant for a while. I understand this business and this process, but I also understand the impact that we have on leadership when all of those jobs go away. When that entry-level, easy to get job, easy to learn a lot job may not be a lifetime career that you want to have, but I do know that GM at Cheesecake Factory is a six-figure plus job. In fact, you may not know this, but if you take a job like a GM at a Panda Express, you can make $60,000 or $70,000. Ask yourself honestly, how many recent college grads are making $60,000 or $70,000? I'm just saying. But as we move this model from a dine-in restaurant to a delivery only, as we abandon the idea of gathering together in a sense of community or a family-style dining, whether it's Denny's or Cracker Barrel or KFC or IHOP, the idea of let's just grab a cup of coffee together, let's grab lunch together. That idea is being pushed to the wayside because the space available to do it, the opportunity to do it, is being abandoned. We're going to soon go back to we've got to gather at my house or your house, or somebody's going to have to bring us a catered meal. It raises the cost, lowers the opportunity. There's not a space to do that anymore. And if we continue to see this trend, just like we saw the front porch go away with air conditioning and the front gathering in the yard go away when the garage door became the entry and video games and doorstep delivery, all of those things have changed our society and our culture, and I'm not convinced they're for the better. We've abandoned some traditions that have a huge influence on the who that we are as people. It's ironic, though. I went to a friend's house who was struck by a tornado this last weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Devastated. They lost pretty much everything. I mean, some of their possessions were still intact. It was really ironic to see the baby's room where the baby doll was still laying in the bed next to the pillow that the little girl was sleeping on. And the bedroom immediately next door was crushed by flying debris from across the road. Surreal, to say the least. But see, when we gathered there, we weren't the only ones that showed up. I mean, they're like family to us. We've known them for a few years. They're part of the same ministry group that we serve with. They are the ones that ordained us. We have great cause to be there. We drove 2 hours plus to be in that place and help them out. But we weren't the only ones. And it wasn't just people from the church. It was absolute strangers who were driving by the night before. They were the storm chasers. They saw the tornado hit the house and they're like, these people are going to need help. And they came back with chainsaws. Who does that? People who have a sense of community, that's who does that. When a storm comes and people you don't know drive hundreds of miles to come and help clean up, when people you don't know drive hundreds of miles to come search for your lost possessions, to find the things, the people, the pets that matter to you, that's a sense of community. When we've all been on lockdown for 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 months, some places longer than that, that's like house arrest. You're locked away. You're mandated to stay in your house and not talk to your neighbors or your friends. And suddenly the release of that brings community back together. People are like, I just want to get together and do something. You know, our side hustle is a DJ business. And I love the fact that most of the time that we get called to bring our sound system, to bring our microphones, to do something in a community, to do something anywhere, it's because it's a gathering of people. Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's a graduation, maybe it's a birthday party, maybe it's an outdoor festival. We just got a call yesterday to do a 4th of July celebration for a community. Bring it on, baby. I am all about seeing the community gather together where neighbors come out of their houses and they spend time getting to know each other. That's a valuable asset. But as the architecture changed, our houses and our front porches and our front stoops went away. The wraparound porch was no longer there for dozens of people to gather. When the back door became the garage door, became the alleyway entry, and most people push the garage door button, drive in, close it behind them, and they never see their neighbors except to take the trash can out or pick up the paper. The paper. Wow, how long has it been since you picked up a newspaper from your front lawn? Well, we've lost that connection with our immediate neighbors. We don't know who they are. You would be amazed if you studied the psychology of how many criminals have no problem going 6 blocks down the road and robbing the people they don't know because they don't want to disturb the people they do know. And immediately when you build that sense of community, you think those are my friends. I wouldn't do that to my friends. The sociological change that takes place when people know one another is fascinating. It minimizes a lot of crime. In fact, a very famous mayor once said, the broken window theory says if you see a broken window and you leave it broken, soon the next one will be broken, and then the next one, and then the whole building will be graffitied, and vagrants will come in and take over like squatters. But if immediately that you see that broken window, you repair that window, what it says to the would-be thieves and vagrants is someone cares about this place. And because someone cares about this place, they're going to keep doing that. And eventually they will stand up to you for breaking that window. So the longer you leave a window broken, the more likely crime will persist. His theory was proven true. In a matter of one term, reduced crime in a big city like New York by 75%. Why? Because when you take good care of your stuff, other people realize you take good care of your stuff and there might be a consequence for destroying it or damaging it. It goes true for your property. It goes true for your relationships. If you don't take good care of your relationships, people don't take good care of you. If you lose that sense of community, people don't care. So what am I saying? Well, we can look back archaeologically at places like the campfire, and we see that even historically, the mikvah was a bathhouse with a very specific purpose. It was always built on living water. It was always built in a place where the water was running. It wasn't just a swimming pool. It had a very specific purpose. And its relationship to the river and to the community was significant. Just look it up. It'll really blow your mind when you look up mikvah, M-I-K-V-E-A-H, mikvah. Look it up. But the idea of having this community gathering, this getting together in local pods of people, that's a leadership principle. It's what people do when they want to have a deep heart-to-heart conversation. They meet on mutual ground. They gather over a meal. They have a discussion with each other. Sometimes the most powerful discussions in the world happen over a meal. I can tell you when I worked in corporate America in a Fortune 50 company, we had meetings. We had more meetings than you could shake a stick at. We had more emails than you could shake a stick at. But I can tell you, most of the things that I accomplished of great significance within that organization happened on the way to the coffee shop. Yeah. When I would say, hey, I want to chat with you for a minute. Let's grab a cup of coffee. My treat. And we would meet in the hallway and walk to the elevator or walk down the stairs together and walk through the building to get to the coffee shop. And by the time we got to the coffee shop, the request that I had been met or denied, or what conditions I needed to get that done were lined out clearly. Why? Community, relationship, interaction. Let's see an AI bot do that. They can't. Or they can fake it. They can mimic it. They can pretend. But they can't do what two humans together can do. We need to be on our guard as leaders to watch the sense of community that we create, the sense of community that we abandon. Well, they seem like traditions, then they're fading, and I understand that. And the new generations, they're looking at our old traditions and going, why did you even have to get together? What are these archaic things called books? Who needs a book? We have digital stuff. I heard someone say just the other day, keep your books, hang on to them, especially the hardbacks. And then they followed that up with the sentiment that I've shared for at least a decade. I don't know if you know this or not. A lot of young people will ask a question of their digital device, whether her name starts with an A or an S or a G. And when they ask that question, they contend that the source from which that information is drawn is truthful, credible, consistent, reliable. And I'd be willing to bet that if you asked the same question of a device every day for 5 years and recorded it, there would be marked changes, notable differences in the reply that you would get from the same device to the same question. Why? It's not hard to go back and look at the Wayback Machine and compare Wikipedia today versus Wikipedia 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. 20 years ago, who is Donald Trump? The answer to that question was a billionaire realtor and media guy out of New York. And all the rappers wanted to be him. Same question today, an indicted possible felon facing hundreds of years in prison. Why? Is it because of changed behavior, or is it because of changed data? You can ask the same question of, I don't know, ivermectin? 10 years ago, it was a good thing. These days, it can get you canceled. Sorry, they've already canceled me. You may not know this. It's a little sidebar. This podcast, what you're watching right now, at one point had 500,000 views per video each month. And then I got a little notification one time that said that the content of my podcast was influencing elections in foreign nations. The National Endowment for Democracy sent me to the Congo for that purpose. But the beings at social media thought that was a bad influence. And so I can't even buy a $5 ad to boost an event coming up. Canceled? Censored? Silenced? Shadow banned? Call it what you want to. I also at one time had 10,000 followers on YouTube, and then I woke up one day and I had 100. And I haven't broken the 200 mark yet. Why? I don't know. Leadership, it's influence, nothing more and nothing less. What do I intend to do right here? Influence. What do we do around the dinner table? Influence. What do we do at the coffee shop? Influence. People who have the ability to make decisions, meeting with people who need to make a decision. We can't just abandon it because it's not the best business model from a black and white bottom line standpoint. We've got to understand the impact that closing all these family-style restaurants will have. Maybe the big chains go away, but I tell you what, I'm going to walk across the square this morning. I'm going to go sit down in Paradise Cafe, which is locally owned. In fact, on a regular basis, I see the people who own it in the restaurant having a cup of coffee. I'll sit and have a chat with them. Maybe I'll see them at church on Sunday. Maybe I'll see them around the community when we're out somewhere else, doing something else. But we get to know the people in our community, the movers and the shakers, and the people who are just watching life go by. Let's grab lunch. That's a leadership declaration. It's also a fading tradition, but it's one that we should not let go of. You might go back and search the title, Take a Walk with Me, because there's actually a phrase that you hear often from high-level, very influential, very powerful leaders. And some of those leaders are so influential and so powerful that just to get 30 seconds alone with them, 30 seconds to have a conversation with them, it'll cost you tens of thousands of dollars. All right, if you want to go to Nectar Island, that'll cost you $25,000 for lunch. True story. Look it up. But sometimes they'll just say, walk with me. And I've had multimillionaires say that to me. And the first time I heard it, I thought, how offensive, how rude that they won't even plant their feet for 1 minute and talk to me. But after a couple of times of it happening, whether they were high-level leaders or they were government leaders or they were multimillionaires, when they said, walk with me, here's what I understood. I can't stop what I'm doing because it impacts so many other people. But I value what you have to say, and I value what I need to say to you enough to say, I will share my journey from point A to point B with you because it's the only time I can afford. But I value you enough to pour that time into this conversation. I've had people say, walk with me, and then after that walk say, let me find 5 more minutes. I had a multimillionaire who said, walk with me. And I walked with them to the coffee shop. They went up to their room. I waited in the hall. They came back down. We went all the way back down. And when we got back down, they said to their team, give me 5 minutes somewhere. Find me a 5-minute window. I want to do an interview with this guy. That kind of community, that kind of leadership, that starts with, hey, let's grab lunch. Let me get any time that I can't. Give me 5 minutes. I will value your 5 minutes. Let's grab lunch is a leadership declaration. It's also a fading tradition. And if we don't protect it and pass it on to the next generation, the best thing they'll have is Wikipedia, AI bots, and DoorDash. And I think we can do better than that. I'm J. Lauren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Lauren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Lauren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Lauren will serve you well.